I tried to beat Pokémon Black with only water types as a hardcore Nuzlocke. Water types are some of the best Pokemon out there since they hit very hard, are pretty bulky, and are the most common types out of the 18 types. This means a water type Nuzlocke is pretty easy, but Unova only has access to 8 water types in the entire game, and 2 of them are as useful as a flamethrower underwater. This is important because in a Nuzlocke, if a Pokemon faints, it's dead forever and can no longer be used, and I can only catch the first water type per new area. The other hardcore Nuzlocke rules are on the screen and the description down below. Let's get started. As per usual, I start out this challenge by picking up a starter. The clear choice here is Oshawott, one of my personal favorite starters. I name her Leviathan because Samurott is the only good Unova starter. Superior has a cool design but sucks due to a lack of second typing, and Ambor is just plain awful, was way too long. With that, rush to Stratton City's gym to face Silent, who is a terrifying Lillipup and Pansage. With Vine Whip, this thing could easily devastate Leviathan. Unfortunately, I don't have a choice but to brute force my way through. But hey, I've beaten Brock with a Rattata, granted it took 21 attempts, but I totally have this in the bag. In attempt 1, Silent leads off a Lillipup and I with Leviathan. Lillipup goes for a scary workup as I go for a focus energy to boost my critical hit ratio. Lillipup then goes for workup numero dos as I hit a water gun, which doesn't crit. Silent then heals up his puppy as water gun does exactly half of Lillipup's HP. After taking a bite, which brings you down to my berry, water gun barely misses out on the KO. This causes Lillipup's pickup ability to activate and he eats my Oranberry. Lillipup then gets a bite which flinches and outspeeds it another bite which leaves me with just 1 HP and gets another flinch. A third bite then finishes Leviathan quickly, marking the end of attempt 1, just like my New Year's resolutions. On attempt 2, I KO the Lillipup and finally see the King of the Jungle, Pansage. Pansage hits a big workup and my tackle crits, but then Pansage outspeeds and hits a Vine Whip which destroys Leviathan, meaning this attempt isn't it either. On attempt 3, a flinch and crit combination means that Leviathan barely does anything in this battle and falls. On attempt 4, the puppy falls, bringing in the monkey. I get off 2 tackles, one of which crits, but then a boosted Razor Leaf KOs, but Pansage's low HP tells me that this battle is possible. Unfortunately, me winning the badge isn't in the foreseeable future. Attempt after attempt, Leviathan comes short of winning the battle. There isn't really much I can do. There are no items I can get other than orange berries, and even then they're not much help. In order to beat this challenge, we're going to need a few critical hits, so it's basically a waiting game at this point. On attempt 15, something interesting happens. Silent leads off with Lillipup, and I with Leviathan. The normal dog goes for a workup as I go for a focus energy. Lillipup then goes for a focus energy as I hit a non-critical hit water gun. After taking a bite, which doesn't flinch, I retaliate with a critical hit water gun to get the KO, which brings in the reincarnation of Satan. Pansage does a big workup as I go for a tail whip. I can abuse the AI by going for a Leer, meaning that Pansage is forced to set up workups. The AI in this game has the IQ of a wet paper towel and will try to compensate for drops by setting up buffs. After hitting 2 Leers, a tackle does around 60% of Pansage's health. However, if Razor Leaf crits, we are dead. Luckily, Silent is an idiot and sets up another workup, meaning tackle KOs, winning me the battle and a very intense first gym badge. This means that after 2 pages of script, we can finally move on. Shortly after this battle, Leviathan evolves into an Oshawott, giving me some bulk and attack, but even still the second gym leader, Lenora, is almost impossible. We're gonna have to come up with some genius play of some sort. But before we can even do that, we have to face Charon in a rival fight who has a Snivy, which is luckily not evolved. I go for a tail whip on turn 1 as Snivy goes for a Razor Leaf, which would have killed if it crit. Luckily, that tail whip means Snivy will go for a Leer to compensate. I then hit a tackle, which gets the critical hit for the one shot. That crit did matter, but all Snivy would have done is just gone for a Leer, meaning on the following turn we would have KO'd. His second Pokemon is a Purloin, and thanks to our extra attack, we can get the KO with a Razor Shell, winning me a pretty straightforward battle. With that, I arrive in Akron City, home of Lenora and her normal types. I did the math, and there's just no way we can beat this battle with Leviathan. Fortunately, outside in Akron, there's this patch of grass outside of Penwell where we can find a temple named Siren. I've never used this Pokemon before or any of the 6 other encounters, but I'm just noticing how disturbing his human face is. I feel like we all know somebody who looks like a Temple. You know, somebody who's been through a lot and is trying to hold it in, but really they're on the verge of a mental breakdown. If that's you, please seek help. Mental health is very important. With Siren under our belt, we can go ahead and face Lenora. She leads off with the Intimidating Herdier, and I with Siren, who absorbs the Intimidate. I go for a Supersonic, which luckily connects as the evolved puppy goes for a Leer. A Bubble Beam that does decent damage as Herdier hits itself in Confusion. A second Bubble Beam and Confusion Chip barely leave the Herdier alive, so it's time for Siren to bow out and the star of the show, Leviathan, to come in. Lenore heals up, so we do get a free switch, which is always pretty nice. I go for a Focus Energy as Herdier for some reason goes for a Leer. A Razor Shell then does more than half as her gear breaks out and just goes for a Leer. Okay, another Razor Shell gets the KO, which brings in Watchog. Watchog goes for a Leer as I hit another Razor Shell doing half. I thought at -3 defense it was over, but Lenore insists on going for a 4th and final Leer, meaning Razor Shell picks up the KO, winning me the battle. I have no idea why that happened, so if anybody in the comments could explain, that would be great. After winning the badge, Team Rocket steals a fossil, meaning I have to go to Pinwheel Forest to get it back. But before I can do that, I have to face 2 trainers with Swaddles in a double battle. Luckily, the AI doesn't seem to be doing anything too good, and Swaddle kinda sucks as a Pokemon, so we get through this fight completely unfazed, and in the forest I can go ahead and get another encounter. Now both areas where I caught Siren and where I'm going to catch my new encounter are called Pinwheel Forest in-game. However, the game code classifies these places as 2 different areas, and many ROM hacks such as Vintage White even go out of their way to make them 2 separate areas. Not to mention, this run is completely impossible without this third encounter, so I decided to count them as 2 separate locations. In the forest, I catch a Pampor named Naiad, who is a Pokemon I've once again never used before. I personally like the elemental monkeys, and I've gotten a lot of flack for it, but I think they look pretty cool. In Celestia City, I go ahead and pick up the Water Stone to evolve Naiad into a Simipour, which is crucial for the next gym fight. The next gym leader is Burr, who uses bug types, but his ace is a Leavanny with a grass type. Leavanny isn't normally a terrifying Pokemon, but without access to a flying or fire move, it's going to be terrifying. Luckily, I do have a plan using the workup TM I got from Silent. I may be able to pull a possible sweep if I can set up enough workups on the Whirlipede, which isn't too threatening. However, it can poison me and it can crit, so we're just going to need to get as lucky as possible. It's not the end of the world if Whirlipede poisons me, but if he gets a few critical hits in a row, the run is over. Burr leads off with Whirlipede and I with Naiad. Naiad outspeeds and sets up a workup and then takes a Poison Tail for a bit of damage. After setting up 4 workups with no crit or poison, I go for a set of Furious Swipes, and at +4, 3 Furious Swipes, one of which crits, is enough for the KO. Naiad also grows to level 24, which gives him more attack and bulk to work with. Naiad's water typing brings in Leavanny, and I get off 4 Furious Swipes, which doesn't KO, but Leavanny misses his Razor Leaf. This is huge, and we could potentially win this fight deathless. Unfortunately, Naiad misses his Furious Swipes, meaning that Razor Leaf destroys poor Naiad. You aren't on the team long, but you won't be forgotten. This gives me a free switch into Leviathan, who is holding an Eviolite, meaning he tanks the Razor Leaf and can go for Retaliate to pick up the KO. Brook's last Pokemon is a Dwebble who is part Rock type, meaning a few Razor Shells are enough for the KO to win us the 3rd gym badge and also our first death. I have to play carefully from now on if I don't want to have a snowball effect. Luckily, I did plan on Naiad not surviving, so this is really recoverable. On the way to the desert resort, I have to face Charon, whose Snivy is now evolved into a Servine. Thankfully, he leads off with a Pidove and I with Leviathan. After taking a soft quick attack, I set up a focus energy to boost that critical hit chance. After taking another quick attack, a Water Pulse is more than enough for the KO, which baits in Servine. Servine sets up a growth as I go for a toe up to lower defense. This causes Servine to set up another growth to compensate, meaning a critical hit Retaliate is enough for the one shot. Third is Pampor, who isn't a threat and falls a few turns later, which just leaves Liepard. Liepard goes for a Torrent before being taken out by critical hit Water Pulse, winning me the fight. In the desert resort, I go ahead and pick up the cover fossil, which will turn into a Tortuga. I then go back to Lenore's gym and revive the fossil, and hey, the scientist is actually nice this time, unlike in other games. Nessie here is an amazing Pokemon and comes with Ancient Power, which will be good into Lisa's Emolgias. Did I also mention that the next gym is electric? Yeah, we are not out of the early game hell quite yet. Thankfully, Siren evolves into a Palpitoad and gains the ground type, otherwise this run would be nearly impossible, just like my attempts to prove that pigeons are government-planted drones. I don't actually believe in this, by the way. Before we can face Lisa for the 4th gym badge, we ride a Ferris wheel with N, who confesses that he's the king of Team Plasma. That is a nice twist, but it's also kind of random. Why would you tell a random 10-year-old that you just met this? Does he not realize I can call the police? After fighting him, which went smoothly, I can go ahead and face Elisa. I do have a strategy which involves abusing Volt Switches and doing massive damage with Nessie. Elisa's Flying Squirrel outspeeds at a weak pursuit instead of Volt Switch, meaning I can nail him with an Ancient Power for massive damage. This is risky because Sturdy is now broken, meaning if Emolga gets the highest high roll or a critical hit, the run is over. Fortunately, we live with 3 HP and nail Emolga number 2 with an Ancient Power for massive damage, and I actually get the Omni Boost. This changes everything because my strategy involved pivoting to Leviathan on a random move, which is subsided by my Eviolite, and then switching out to Siren on an electric move. I also realized I have priority Aqua Jet, so I just hit that, and thanks to the special attack boost, it KOs. Alicia's second Emolga comes back in, so I stay in and take the KO with an Aqua Jet, which activates Static. This is fine, however, because Nessie's done his job as our terrifying Zipstrika comes in. Since Nessie is so low and Zipstrika sees the kill with a random move, I switch into Siren, who luckily comes out on a Volt Switch, which does no damage. We then start exchanging quick attacks and mud shots, and Elisa does heal up a few times. Luckily, a few turns later, I get a critical hit after Elisa heals, allowing me to pick up the KO in what could have been a pretty scary 4th gym badge. Before we can get out of the early game hell, we have one more fight against Charon. He leads off with Lipard and I with Leviathan, who gets flinched by a fake out. Lipard then goes for a Torment as I set up a focus energy, meaning on the following turn I have to tank a pursuit and kill with a hard revenge. Second is the demonic Servine, who goes for a Leech Seed before I hit a return. After tanking a Leaf Tornado, I hit a Revenge, which luckily crits to take the demonic Snake out. Third is Panimport, who takes a return and hits a Scald, which actually gets the burn. Burn damage combined with Leech Seed brings me down to just 3 HP, so I have to switch into Siren on a hard Scald. Mudshot is just shy of the KO, meaning I have to dodge a critical hit, which does happen, so Mudshot kills the monkey, leaving Tranquil. Luckily, I have Nessie, who comes in for free on its attack and takes it out a few turns later, winning me a surprisingly hard battle. Fortunately, Charon Servine, or any grass type for that matter, won't be an issue, because weirdly enough, I can get an encounter on Charizard Bridge, which actually doesn't have any Charizards on it. On these spots, there's a chance to find a Ducklet, but it takes a while because I get a bunch of random items. Eventually, I do find one and name her Quacken. Quacken on the team means that we're done with the early game hell, as we now have Siren and Quacken to deal with grass and electric types. Luckily, there are only a few electric types at the end of the game, and the only grass type that's an issue is Charon Servine. This brings us to the fight against Clay and his ground type, so it's a pretty easy matchup. I lead off with Nessie and he leads off with Krokrok. I had a pretty hard priority Aqua Jet as Krokrok misses a Swagger. This causes Clay to heal up as an Aqua Jet drags the Croc into the yellow. This causes Clay to heal up again, and luckily we're back to the same spot, meaning another Aqua Jet gets the KO, which brings in Palpitoad. Palpitoad tanks an Aqua Jet but then just misses a Muddy Water. I then hit another Aqua Jet, bringing Palpitoad below 50%, and he misses another Muddy Water. For that record, that is 3 attacks in a row that Nessie's dodged. Since I'm at full HP, I KO with another Aqua Jet, leaving Clay's ace Excadrill. When I planned this battle, I thought Nessie would KO Krokrok at best, but Leviathan would be forced to handle everything else, so I don't really have a plan for this thing. An Aqua Jet does a little less than 50%, as Excadrill sets up a Home Claws, making this somewhat scary. I then take a Bulldoze, which brings me down to just 1 HP before I hit a Brine, which crits and ends the battle. The RNG in that battle was insane, but this fight was never going to be scary at all, and either way, that's 5 gym badges obtained. After being kidnapped by N, I make it to Mershon City and meet Skyla and some other random guy. I then ring a bell for some reason, and shortly after, Quacken evolves into a Swanna, which will be great into Skyla's flying types. This does have the potential to be pretty scary, but I do have a plan. Unfortunately, it doesn't help that the level cap prevents 3 of my Pokemon from evolving into their final forms. This would have given me enough bulk and attack to trivialize the fight, meaning I have to use my brain, which isn't always the best strategy. Skyla leads off with Swoobat and I with Nessie. Swoobat sets up an Amnesia on the first turn as Crunch is just shy of the KO. Sky then heals up, so I had an Aqua Jet so Crunch KOs the next time. Unfortunately, Swoobat hits a Heart Stamp, which flinches. Fortunately, the next Heart Stamp doesn't flinch, allowing me to KO with a Crunch as Skyla sends in Swanna. This means I switch into Leviathan on a resisted Bubble Beam. Leviathan then dodges an Air Slash before hitting a return for about a third. Swanna then sets up an Aqua Ring as I nail the bird with a second return. After taking a hard Air Slash, return KO Skyla's ace. This just leaves Skyla with our last Pokemon, Unfezant. Unfezant goes for a Razor Wind as I go for a return, but looking back I should have gone for a Water Pulse. After taking said Razor Wind, return crits and leaves Unfezant with just a sliver. This means it's off to Quacken for a debut battle as Skyla heals up. I go for a Fly as Unfezant sets up a Razor Wind. Fly does around 50% and Razor Wind does about a third. This means I can outspeed on the following turn and hit a second Fly, winning me the battle and the 6th gym badge. That went surprisingly well. Before you can progress, we have another Charon battle, and luckily this is the last one for a while. He leads off with Unfezant and I with Nessie, who's evolved into a Caracosta. I try to go for an Ancient Power, but Unfezant takes one out of the Pelipper Handbook and protects. On the following turn, Unfezant then gets off a second Protect. Unfezant then goes for a Taunt as Ancient Power does massive damage. Luckily, I then hit a Priority Aqua Jet to get the KO, which brings in Servine, who's fortunately not fully evolved. Since Nessie would be destroyed by any grass move, I switch into Quacken on a Mega Drain for neutral damage. And Aerial Ace is just shy of the KO as Leaf Blade brings me down to just 11 HP. Fortunately, it doesn't crit, meaning another Aerial Ace destroys Servine. Third is Lipard, so it's off to Leviathan on a Fake Out. After taking an Assurance, Revenge is enough for the KO. Next is Simipour, who hits a Scald, and Revenge does more than 50%. I needlessly risk a critical hit here and take the kill with another revenge to win me the battle. After this we made Alder the champion. He jumps down from at least 20 feet to give me the Surfeit gem, which is the best move for this playthrough. It's not only a great stab move, but we can get our final 3 encounters of the game with it. On Route 1, I pick up a Basculin named Cetus, who is a semi-decent encounter with adaptability. On Route 17, I pick up a Frillish named Hydra, who is by far the best pickup with great bulk and a great ghost water typing. However, it will be a while before I can use him. Last and certainly least is an Alomola named Fish. With Protect, Rocky Helmet, and Wish, this could potentially be an okay support Pokemon, and she is fairly bulky. But this Pokemon is a total bench warmer, at least for now. After watching Sharon and Team Plasma fight each other, and not me thankfully, I make my way to Bryson's gym. Bryson uses Ice type, so I'm not too worried. I had this plan with Leviathan where I was going to set up a Focus Energy and hold the Scope Lens item. Combine that with Slash's high critical hit ratio, I would get a critical hit every time. However, that did not happen, even though ChatGPT and some internet forums told me I would always get a critical hit. Bryson leads off with Vanellish, and I with Leviathan. I go for a Focus Energy as the creative Gen 5 design goes for an Acid Armor. I then hit a non-critical at Slash and avoid a Mirror Shot. On the following turn, Slash still doesn't get the critical hit and I take a Mirror Shot for 8 HP. I have no clue why either of these Slashes didn't crit. Fortunately, Leviathan pulls her act together and hits a critical hit Slash on the following turn to take the KO. Second is Beartic, and Slash doesn't crit, allowing him to connect with a Swagger. Fortunately, Leviathan doesn't get confused and goes for a Slash, bringing the Polar Bear into the yellow. Leviathan then hurts herself in confusion, and combine that with Slash damage, she's left with 45 HP. Since I'm low, I switch into Nessie, who resists the Slash. Nessie then gets swaggered, causing him to hit himself in confusion. Luckily, after shrugging off a brine, an Ancient Power seals the bear's fate, leaving Cryogonal. Cryogonal outspeeds hit an Aura Beam, but I hit back with an Ancient Power for about a third. Since I'm dead to a critical hit or a high range, I switch into Siren on the Aurora Beam, which lowers my attack. After taking a second lowering attack Aurora Beam, I had a Bulldoze, but I forgot this thing had Levitate. This was a huge misplay on my part, and I need to think on my feet. I switch into Cetus on an Aurora Beam. If Cetus goes down, so be it. Cetus is dead to a few critical hits and the highest of high rolls, but that never happens, and despite a few attack drops, he picks up the KO with some headbutts. This wins me the battle, but I admit that was very sloppy on my end. After this, some End soldiers appear from nowhere, meaning that Bianca, Charon, Bryson, and I have to face them. But before that happens, Hydra evolves into a Jellicent, and man, this thing will be useful later down the line. For now, he kinda looks like Mr. Pringle. Speaking of which, I was at my local Target and I saw the new crap design for Pringle, so I asked the cashier what happened. She had no idea what I was talking about, and she didn't really seem interested. Do you guys think the CIA killed JFK? Well, this cutscene isn't remotely disturbing at all. What comes after this is a huge backtracking fetch quest, which is basically nothing but some meaningless grunt fights and mashing the A button repeatedly. Normally in Pokemon, the Team Evil stuff wraps up after 7 gym badges, but this game is different because Team Plasma is a threat from start to finish. On my way to Overleveling City, I meet this guy who tells me not to go in a cave. Dude, you are not Border Patrol. For now, however, it's time to face Drayden and his dragons for badge number 8. His hacks can be scary, but I do have a play here. He leads off with Fracture and I with Quacken. I go for a fly as Fracture sets up a Dragon Dance. This could be scary, but luckily I connect for massive damage. On the following turn, I tank an Assurance and go back up in the air for another fly. Fracture tries to set up again, but it doesn't matter because Fly once again connects and gets the KO. Second is Dragalge, so I stay in and I go for a Feather Dance to lower the Lego Dragon's attack as he just whiffs a Dragon Tail. This means I can go for another Feather Dance, getting the Dragon to -4 as he finally connects with a Dragon Tail, dragging out Leviathan. Leviathan sets up a Focus Energy and tanks a Night Slash for a bit of chip, meaning on the following turn I connect with a Slash which crits. All Draudigan can do is retaliate with a soft Chip Away. Another Slash once again gets the critical hit, but is shy of the KO as I tank a second Chip Away. Drain then heals back to full HP as I hit a third critical hit Slash. I then get off one more Slash as Draudigan connects with a Dragon Tail to bring in Nessie. After tanking a -4 resisted Chip Away, Nessie retaliates with a Crunch, leaving Draudigan with 1 HP. Drain then heals up, so I take this time to have a Curse to raise my attack and defense in exchange for lowering my speed. After tanking a weak Night Slash, a Crunch does decent damage. I then set up another Curse as Draudigan hits a Revenge for 6 HP. On the following turn, I hit a Crunch which crits to take the Draudigan out. This just leaves Drayden with his Dragon Dancing Haxorus. A Crunch does more than half and gets the defense drop as the Dragon whiffs a Dragon Tail. I honestly expected him to start up a Dragon Dance, and had he connected that could have been a huge issue. Thankfully, on the following turn, I connect with a final crunch to get the KO, winning me the 8th and final gym badge. When I was playing this game, it was getting pretty late, so I decided to save and go to bed. When I woke up the next morning, I got on my computer to start recording, only to find out I was in Chargestone Cave. That doesn't make sense. I guess my game never saved, and normally when I lose progress, it only takes about 10 minutes to catch up because of how frequently I like to save. However, I'm missing 3 badges and a bunch of story stuff as well as half my encounters. According to my personal rule set used by Pokemon challenges, I can basically do whatever I want until I reach where I should have saved. Since the level cap of the Elite Four is 50, I decided to level up everybody to 43 and sweep everything up until Drayden. This is allowed because I've already completed these battles legitimately. However, we have an issue as 3 of my encounters need to be rerolled, meaning they'll have different IVs and natures. About 2 hours later, I beat Drayden and I'm back on my way with 3 new encounters. Before we can head off to Victory Road, we have one more rival fight with Sharon. He is terrifying because he already has a fully evolved superior with Leaf Blade, Growth, and Leftovers. He could easily sweep me if I'm not careful. Sharon leads off with Unfezant and I with Leviathan. Unfezant wants to be Pelipper so badly and goes straight Protect, wasting some PP. On the following turn, Unfezant goes for a Razor Wind as I go for an Encore. I was hoping for a Detect, but this is okay. After tanking a critical hit Razor Wind, Surf does massive damage. This means Unfezant sets up a Whirlwind that I'll never get to use, meaning Surf gets the KO to bring in Superior. We are mere steps away from the Pokemon League, and I can't have any of my good Pokemon become sacrifices. This means I have to sack Cetus to get a free switch into Quacken, and the only way to do that is to have Cetus tank a Leaf Blade with a Sliver, do some chip damage, and die. With a heavy heart, I switch into Cetus, who gets hit by a critical Leaf Blade, which ends his life. RIP, you did KO that Cryogonal, and you will always be remembered. This gives me a free switch into Quacken, who goes for a Fly as the terrifying Snake sets up a Coil. You'll notice I level Quacken exactly to the level cap of 50 because I am not playing around. A Flying Gem boosted Fly does massive damage, which puts Superior in the range of the kill on the following turn. Superior hits a massive Leaf Blade, bringing me down to 21 HP. However, it's over because I can go back up in the air and KO with a second and final Fly. Third is Leopard, so I switch into Nessie on an Assurance. An Aqua Jet does massive damage as I tank a Night Slash. Liepard then hits another Night Slash, and Ancient Power does massive damage even though it doesn't get the Omni Boost. Since I'm dead to a critical hit, I decide to switch into Siren on a Night Slash. I then take another Night Slash down to 52 HP before Surf gets the KO. Fourth and last from Sharon is a Simipour, and since I'm dead to a critical hit, I switch into Hydra on a Scald, which is negated by Water Absorb. After the Monkey goes for a Leer, I hit a Hex for decent damage. After taking a Lick, I hit another Hex for decent damage, but then on the next turn, Simipour's Lick paralyzes and Hex low rolls. I risk it and luckily break through to get the KO, winning me the battle. Now that I think about it, Lick is kind of a disturbing move. Could you imagine a random Pokemon licking another Pokemon? Kinda gross. Anyway, here is my final Elite Four team leveled up to the cap of 50. It is worth noting that I used 2 level caps, one to match the Elite Four's Ace, and one to match Gets' Hydreigon, as I feel like that gives me an even playing field. The Elite Four in this game is terrifying, with Chantel and Caitlyn being huge issues. Also, don't even get me started on N's team with an Electric type Legendary. Also, I heavily modify movesets and TMs to match certain scenarios. With that, let's get started. First in the Elite Four is the Dark type trainer Grimsling, and he leads off with a Scrafty with a Flying type weakness. I lead off with Quacken to capitalize on this. A Fly does massive damage as Scrafty retaliates with a Crunch. It doesn't matter because another Fly is enough for the KO, which brings in Crocodile with Intimidate. Fortunately, Surf is special, so I can get the clean one-shot. Second is Liepard, so I stay in and tank the Fake Out. Since I'm low, it's off to Nessie on a Limp Night Slash. 2 Surfs later, and the Demon Cat falls, which brings in Grimsley's final Pokemon, Bisharp, whose Steel type makes him a moderately challenging threat. With Nessie's Rock type, he's weak to a critical hit, so it's off to Siren on a Night Slash, which crits down to 11 HP. Siren can't stay in, so I switch into Leviathan, who tanks the Night Slash much better. Bisharp then outspeeds at another Night Slash as Surf brings Bisharp into the yellow. This causes Grimsley to heal up as Surf is just shy of the KO. Grimsley then heals up again as Surf brings Bisharp deep into the red. Since I'm dead to a Night Slash high roll, I switch into Fish for his debut battle. Fish actually tanks the Night Slash fairly well, but that makes sense considering how bulky she is. From here, I hit an Aqua Jet for a bit of damage before tanking a final Night Slash. A final priority Aqua Jet is enough for the KO, winning me the battle and what was supposed to be the easiest Elite Four fight. It was insane how close we were to losing Siren. Second is Marshall and his fighting type, so I lead off with Leviathan against his throw. I set up a focused energy before tanking a critical hit Bulldoze, lowering my speed. Thankfully, Throw whiffs a Stone Edge on the following turn, allowing me to connect with a Surf for decent damage. Throw then misses a second Stone Edge, allowing me to KO with a critical hit Surf. Second is Sog, who does connect with a Stone Edge as Surf does more than 50%. I decide to risk a critical hit here, which leaves me with just 13 HP, allowing me to take the KO with a Surf. Third is Conkeldurr, so it's off to Fish to absorb the Retaliate. I then go for a Soak to remove Conkeldurr's stab before tanking a Hammer Arm. I then go for a Protect to stall a bit, and since I'm dead to a critical hit, I switch into Siren, who avoids the Hammer Arm. A Drain Punch does a bit of damage as Hammer Arm takes a ton of my HP. Since I am faster, I go for a Drain Punch, and thanks to the attack drop, I survive. From here, I switch into Hydra, who's immune to Hammer Arm. A Hex then does decent damage as Conkeldurr whiffs a Stone Edge. A Shadow Ball on the following turn is then enough for the KO. Fourth and last is Mienshao, who hits a Rock Slide, causing Hydra to flinch. After tanking another slide, Shadow Ball does decent damage. I risk a crit here, and Rock Slide brings me down to 13 HP, but flinches. Since I'm dead to any roll of damage, I switch into Nessie to avoid the Rock Slide. A High Jump Kick then does massive damage as Surf is barely shy of the KO. As Marsha heals up, I switch into Quacken, who outspeeds and on the following turn gets the one-shot with a fly, winning me the battle. Third in the Elite Four is Caitlyn. She leads off with Reuniclus and I with Hydra. A Ghost Gem boosted Shadow Ball is more than enough for the KO, which brings in Gothitelle, who is terrifying with Calm Mind. Gothitelle immediately sets up a Calm Mind, meaning Shadow Ball's damage is reduced. Since Gothitelle also knows Thunderbolt, any Pokemon I switch to would instantly die. I could switch to Siren, but whatever move Gothitelle clicks next would most likely kill. Fortunately, Hydra is fairly bulky, so he takes a Thunderbolt and gets a Shadow Ball, getting the special defense drop. Since I am dead to anything, I risk it and switch out to Siren, who takes the +1 Shadow Ball fairly well. Thanks to the defense drop, we outspeed and KO on the following turn, which brings in Sigilyph. Sigilyph outspeeds and it's a Psychic, bringing me down to 17 HP as I set up the Rain with a Rain Dance. Since I'm dead to anything, I switch into Leviathan on a resisted Ice Beam. Sigilyph then hits a hard Psychic before Leviathan, holding a Water Gem, responds with an even harder Surf to get the KO. Last from Caitlyn is Musharna, who is fairly bulky. A Surf does do massive damage before Psychic brings me down to just 1 HP. Holy sh**. When recording, I was too busy watching How I Met Your Mother. It's a pretty good show and I recommend it. This was a huge mistake on my part, but we're never punished because on the following turn, Surf gets the KO, winning me a very sloppy battle. The RNG in this challenge has been on my side a ton, and hopefully it'll stay that way. Fourth and last in the Elite Four is Chantel, whose Jellicent and Cofagrigus hit very hard. Her Jellicent in particular has a super effective move for all of my Pokemon, so I put off this fight for as long as possible to gain some levels. She leads off with Cofagrigus and I with Leviathan. A Water Gem boosted Surf isn't quite enough for the KO as Leviathan gets hit by a Will-O-Wisp. Thankfully, Surf is special and Will-O-Wisp only affects physical moves, so another Surf gets the KO. Second is the terrifying Jellicent, but we have a Jellicent of our own. Before I switch, Leviathan gets off a Surf for a bit of chip and tanks an Energy Ball. Since I am dead to anything, I switch into Hydra on a Shadow Ball for massive damage. Now this is where things get tricky. Hydra has to dodge a critical hit Surf, and a Ghost Gem boosted Shadow Ball should KO. The question is, will he hold? He goes down to 8 HP and fires off a Ghost Gem boosted Shadow Ball, which crits, though it didn't really matter. Third is Chandelure, and since I'm dead to anything, I switch into Siren on a Shadow Ball, which gets the defense drop. Fortunately, I outspeed and I hit a Surf as Chandelure whiffs a Fire Blast. Once again, I wasn't paying attention because I was watching the Pineapple incident. Chantel then heals up twice until she runs out, and I take the kill with Surf, which just leaves Golurk. Since I'm dead to anything, it's off to Quacken on a whiffed EQ. A Surf is barely shy of the KO as Golurk takes itself out with a Curse. I didn't know it was like that, man, I'm sorry. Anyway, that's the Elite Four defeated, very sloppily might I add. Is sloppily a word? With that, I've defeated all Elite Four members and I'm ready to face Alder and his bug types. However, when I arrive, I realize that N already beat Alder, meaning I have to face him instead. His team is terrifying with an Electric-type Legendary, a Zoroark that hits hard, a Klinklang with Thunderbolt, and an Archeops. I've wiped to the Archeops before, so I'm not taking any chances whatsoever. Even if we defeat N, we still have to face Ghetsis, who is a terrifying Ace and Hydreigon. He also has an Electros, which hits super hard and has Levitate. Seismitoad is also pretty scary with Earthquake, and Cofagrigus could pull a Toxic Protect Stall. Either way, it all ends here, so let's begin the final two fights of the game. N leads off with a Zekrom and I with Nessie. This may seem like an odd lead, but you'll see why Nessie's so important later. Either way, I do get a free switch into Siren because of Nessie's Water type baiting Fusion Bolt. From here, Zekrom sets up a light screen as I go for a bunch of Bulldozes. Zekrom does do massive damage in return, but I emerge victorious. Without Siren, Zekrom would have probably swept my entire team. Second is Klinklang, and I take a Hyper Beam on 4 HP and hit a Drain Punch for some recovery. On the recharge turn, I once again hit another Drain Punch, which is just shy of the KO. Luckily, N heals, and a third Drain Punch gets me to the green HP range. After taking another Hyper Beam, Drain Punch is once again shy of the KO. Luckily, Klinklang can't do anything, so another Drain Punch gets the KO. Third is Vanillix, and since I'm dead to anything, I switch into Leviathan on a Whiffed Blizzard. Vanillix senses up the Hail as I go for an Encore, locking him to using Hail. Since Vanillix can't do anything, a few turns later, the crafty Gen 5 design falls. Fourth is Zoroark, who hits a hard Focus Blast before an X-Scissor does massive damage. Luckily, on the following turn, I outspeed and take Zoroark out with a second X-Scissor. Fifth is Caracasta, so I switch into Nessie on a Whiffed Stone Edge. I then go for a Bulldoze for a bit of chip as Caracasta whiffs another Stone Edge. I then hit a Surf, bringing the turtle into the yellow as Caracasta finally connects with a Stone Edge. Fortunately, it doesn't matter because a final Surf gets the KO, which just leaves Archeops. Remember, I've wiped this thing before, so I am out for revenge. A Stone Edge does decent damage as Surf barely misses out on the KO. M for some reason doesn't heal, meaning a final priority Aqua Jet finishes off Archeops, winning me the battle. But we're not out of the woods yet because Getsus wants to fight me. He leads off with Cofagrigus and I with Nessie. Nessie has Crunch for super effective damage, and you can't swap leads between fights. Nessie also baited out Fusion Bolts from Zekrom, making him a very good pivot. Cofagrigus outspeeds and hits a Toxic as Nessie hits a Crunch, which causes Mummy to activate. Getsus whiffs a Full Restore as I hit a Bulldoze to lower the Coffin speed. A Crunch then does decent damage as I then take a Shadow Ball and combine with poison damage. Nessie is left with just 17 HP. I can't afford to swap in here, so with a heavy heart, Nessie fires off one more Crunch to take out Cofagrigus and is taken out himself by the poison. RIP. This was my first time using a Caracasta, and Nessie did not disappoint. Getsus then sends in Bouffalant, so I send in Siren. Siren baits out Head Charges, so I can switch into Hydra, who baits out Wild Charges. I can keep switching between these two for about 20 minutes until Bouffalant is out of both moves. From here, it's off to Quacken on a hard Poison Jab. I then go for a Feather Dance, lowering Bouffalant's attack, meaning Poison Jab isn't doing that much damage. Unfortunately, he gets the poison off, which puts me on a timer. Luckily, I do have Roost, so I use that to heal up on a Poison Tail, and I can then go for a Feather Dance, lowering Bouffalant's attack to -4. I then proceed to go for another Roost while Bouffalant isn't doing much damage with Poison Tail. On the next turn, I go for another Feather Dance, lowering Bouffalant's attack to -6. I then go for Roost a few more times while all Bouffalant can do is hit some weak Poison Jabs. Eventually, I Roost to relatively full HP, and I hit a Surf for a bit of damage and tank another Poison Jab. A Surf then brings Bouffalant into the yellow. Quacken then hits another Surf, which is just shy of the KO, but then Poison Jab crits to kill Quacken. Quacken was an amazing Pokemon and invaluable. Sleep well, Queen. This does give me a free switch into Siren, who is able to KO Bouffalant with a Drain Punch, bringing in his ace Hydreigon. My plan is to do some chip with Fish, but as I switch into him, Dragon Pulse crits and Fish dies for nothing. RIP. You were used a total of 1 time, but I'm sure somebody will remember you. Hydra comes in and hits some attacks for a bit of chip before being taken out by a Dragon Pulse. RIP, you will actually be missed. Leviathan takes his place where 3 of his family members have fallen and tanks a Dragon Pulse. He then retaliates with a Dragon Gem boosted Dragon Tail. It does massive damage and luckily switches Hydreigon out for Bisharp. Bisharp comes in and hits a Night Slash. Surf is just shy of the KO, meaning Leviathan has to go down. Leviathan was my starter and carried us throughout the early game. With a heavy heart, I watch as my day 1 companion falls. Siren stands alone in a 4 against 1 and things are not looking good. A Drain Punch is lucky enough to get the KO on Bisharp, which brings in Hydreigon. He hits a hard Dragon Pulse as Drain Punch luckily gets the KO and nets me some HP. But from Getsus is a Seismitoad of his own. A Grass Knot leaves Seismitoad with 1 HP, and I'm expecting an Earthquake to do massive damage, but Getsus throws the fight by going for a Rain Dance. This is great because on the following turn, another Grass Knot gets the KO. Last is Electras, who takes massive damage from a Surf and just goes for a Crunch. This means a final Surf, boosted by all 7 deaths of the challenge, gets the KO, winning me the battle and the entire run. That was a super fun run. I did a ton of good RNG, and some of it doesn't seem real. I'd never used any of these Pokemon before other than Leviathan and Basculin in a one-off Emerald Road playthrough. Caracasta and Seismitoad were great Pokemon, and I definitely want to use them more. Pokemon Black and White are my favorite games in the series, and after wiping in a challenge, I didn't touch the games for about a year. These games are phenomenal and hold up almost 13 years later. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing and follow me on Twitter. Thank you so much for watching once again, and have a great day.